Hey guys, have a new guest on the show today. He goes by the name of Stuart Cook, and he is the CEO of 180 Nutrition, which is a very well-established worldwide nutrition brand now, but especially here in Australia. And also he has his own podcast, which, the 180 Nutrition podcast, called The Health Sessions, and he's really making some great changes and movement within the fitness and nutrition industry. He's had a huge impact on that. And yeah, Stu, how you doing today, mate?
Very well, thank you, mate. And I appreciate the opportunity to have a chat to you, because I can see that you're doing some great things as well. So I'm keen to see where you're coming from at the moment as well during this chat.
Mate, it's an honor to have you on, and I think the listeners are going to really benefit from this episode because I'm a massive fan of the podcast, and obviously I was fortunate enough to feature on the podcast. So you have some amazing guests on there, so you must be learning a lot from all of these guests, mate, because I mean a lot of them are experts within their field, obviously including me, you know.
Absolutely. Oh, look, totally. And I'm really so blessed to be able to connect with these experts, and yourself included, because you're doing something that 99% of the population really struggle to do in terms of body composition, because it's very scientific, and you need to be very disciplined and regimented, and you need to put your heart and soul into it. So for X number of 1,000 people out there that want to do what you do, then dial into our conversation before and you get some great insights. But I generally like to take home 1, 2, 3 pieces of golden pieces of information from each guest, and then just see whether we can apply that to our lives each day, every day, with the ultimate goal in being the best versions of ourselves, living long and happy lives, rather than just going for the quick fix and suffering the consequences along the way, which can often be the case.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm a big fan of your company as well, because it is based on wellness, and actually I guess the kind of idea behind it was health, helping people reach optimal health, but at the same time helping them supplement a good diet. And I use your protein, the grass-fed whey protein, but it's also loaded with 10 other ingredients, which are, for example, just chia seeds, and you've got the sunflower kernels, and all this mixture of nutrients together, which which is the right idea, because there's a lot of really, really, in fact, I go as far to say is the majority of supplements out there nowadays are actually probably doing more harm than good. Right, Stu?
Look, we've been around for a decade.
Wow.
Yeah, 10 years.
Wow.
And we started from a place back in the day where my business partner worked with a small group of renegade health professionals who were treating people with chronic disease, namely cancer, in a very different way. So they were giving them the most nutritious diet that they could possibly prescribe, which meant no processed foods, no mountains of sugar, and no low fat diet. So it was all very high fat, quality grass fed proteins, and they were lifting weights as well. So to promote human growth hormone. So they were trying to reduce inflammation. And the offshoot of that was that it was wildly successful for these guys. No crazy cures, but their bloods were looking better than they ever had. These guys had more energy and vigor than they ever had before, and they had more. They just felt great. Medications were dropped drastically. So we thought, wow. This is what happens when you actually feed the body what it needs, the raw materials what it needs. And this is what happens when you pull all of the stuff that is doing the opposite of that, so it's holding us back. And at the time, we were tasked with trying to supplement this group's diet with a protein source, because they needed more protein, because they were growing like they hadn't for a long time. and there was nothing on the high street. Everything on the high street was synthetically manufactured with fillers and thickeners and sugars and sweeteners and all this nasty stuff. And so we decided, well, let's just make something ourselves. Let's use whole foods, real foods, like ingredients that you recognize, with the ultimate aim of trying to get more nutrition into everybody's day, and everybody could be able to consume this, in terms of toddlers to busy, mums, gym goers, elite athletes. It doesn't matter, and that's kind of where it started. And today, of course, there is still a huge industry behind synthetic supplements, but with all the stuff that we're learning nowadays, we realize that our gut health is important, our hormones are important, nourishing our brain with quality fats is important too. So it's a sliding scale. You've got the promise of these synthetic supplements and all the crazy marketing that goes with it, versus whole food solutions. So it is it's still touch and go as to whether you'll come out the shop with something that's actually good for you.
That's it, for sure. No, that's great, because you kind of covered one of my other questions. Then I was going to ask you kind of, what inspired you to start 180 Nutrition, but yeah, and I have another question now off the back of that. But anyway, I was just going to say, before we dive into it, could you give us a little bit more of an insight of what your background is, prior to a decade ago when you started 180 Nutrition, and and then if you when you fast forward a little bit, if you could just tell us exactly what kind of inspired you to start 180 Nutrition. I know you covered some of that then, but that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, look, so my background is in design, of all things. So typically, I trained as a graphic designer like 25 plus years ago, and website design and things like that. And so I was always helping people create brands and launch brands and build websites and market their own products, and always had a very, very vested interest in health. So I like to lift weights, and I'm into my mountain bike. I used to race that when I lived in the UK, and just like to eat well, like move my body. Like if I don't move my body, I just feel everything feels wrong. Like I feel like a caged animal. I've got to do something. And so when I met my business partner, who at the time was a personal trainer at a big university gym in Sydney, we came together and realized that we had all these skill sets that we could combine to create a company. And this passion was about this whole food protein supplement, because I'd tried samples of prototypes of this and thought, wow, this is so radically different, because I used to take supplements myself. And so we joined forces, and between us we had the personal trainer nutritional side, and then we also had the marketing side as well. And then as we came together, we started just to learn more and more about where we wanted to take the company. And we realized that not only are the high streets awash with so many crazy processed options, but the information that we were getting from mainstream media was the same. Like, it was based on old and flawed science. It wasn't unique to the individual, and it was just kind of sending out these blanket terms of, you want to lose weight? Right, no problems. Well, cut your calories and exercise more. But it's so much deeper than that. So we decided that we wanted to start a podcast, and we'd reach out to the very best minds on the planet about any given subject. So whether it's microbiome or gut health or metabolic science, all of these things. And that enabled us then to ask the questions that were on everybody's tongues, really truly try and understand what's going on in the health world, and why as a nation we're getting fatter and sicker, and why kids are getting more allergies than they've ever had before, and they're putting on weight like we never used to see, 15, 20 years ago. And so essentially that allowed us to offer, in our mind's eye, the best nutritional products backed with the very best in terms of information as well. So people could just become curious and say, well, hold on a minute. Like, I've been doing this for so long and it's not working for me. I wonder why. And then they could turn to our podcast session, for instance, and dial into a cutting edge expert on the topic of their choice and just learn so much. And I think when you're curious, that just leads you down this rabbit hole then of voraciously wanting to find out as much information about the topic as possible and empowering yourself to make change. So that's kind of where we came from.
Incredible, mate. I love that, because it's hard to come by, you know, especially within this industry, you know, whether you want to say, you know, the supplement industry or fitness, nutrition, regardless, there's so much bad information out there now, and especially with the emergence of, you know, social media and all these different platforms you can get that information from. Unfortunately, one of the big things I believe which is missing from this industry, whether you call it fitness, nutrition, you know, you have a nutrition company, so it is integrity. I think a lot of these, you know, most people out there are really not, you know, it's maybe a bit harsh saying most people, but there's so many people out there who really are just, you know, doing this for the wrong reasons. But obviously the reason you're doing it is because, you know, you genuinely want to help people in regards to, you know, overall wellness. And I want to touch upon something you just mentioned then in regards to kids having, you know, intolerances. You have kids of your own, right, Stu?
I do, yeah.
How many have you got?
I got 3 girls.
Jeez.
So 3 girls.
3 girls? Oh, man.
Twins at 10 and the eldest is 13.
Oh, wow. That is insane.
Yeah,
so you're busy. You're a busy guy, man, to say the least. Keep
well,
you on your toes.
You can count the rings under my eyes. That's as to how old I am.
Nah, mate. But I was just gonna say, yeah. So you can obviously probably elaborate a bit more on this, because, you know, with your kids being in school and whatnot. Like, even when I was younger, I'm 31, coming on to 32. I cannot recall a single kid in my school, primary school and high school, with intolerances. There may have been a few. I can't remember any. But nowadays, I hear, you know, it's the norm to find half of the class, even more, with certain intolerances, whether that be gluten, dairy. Do you think there's something going on there, Stu?
Totally, without a shadow of a doubt. And the same for me. Like, when I was in school, the word intolerance, like, it wasn't even in our vocab. Like, we just ate food, and there was perhaps a token child in the school that was overweight for whatever reason. But it was certainly in the minority. But these days, and definitely with my girls in school, we got kids that are intolerant to everything. I've got lots of my daughter's friends who actually carry EpiPens because they're that allergic to. I mean, this is, you know, life-threatening stuff. They eat a peanut, they could go into anaphylactic shock, so they have to carry around all this stuff. Where's it coming from? You know, it's really, really interesting. And I've had lots of chats with some very interesting people around this, in terms of doctors and health specialists in functional medicine and things like that. And they liken it to a couple of different areas. And again, like, this is an opinion. I'm happy to share it. Like, I don't say that this is what it is, but
antidote kind of thing, antidote, or whatever you say, whatever they call it. Yeah,
exactly right. So I had a great chat with an orthopedic surgeon a couple of years back that spoke about pregnancy, and in terms of when the fetus is actually developing and the immune system of the fetus is developing. It often comes down to the diet way before conception of the mother. And during conception, during pregnancy. And he likened issues with the immune system to the consumption of vegetable oils. So vegetable oils, one of these things that people think, or we're led to believe, is the healthy option in terms of the lower in saturated fat, the sunflower oil and canola oil and all these oils that sound healthy, when in actual fact, a large percentage of them are anything but. They are seed oils that are a byproduct of an industry, and have been known to be to cause high levels of inflammation in the body. So his theory was that the immune system of the mother is so inflamed and so reactive that that's then passed on to the fetus as it's developing, and the baby is born with all of these allergies and reactions and sensitivities to whatever given food, based upon the fact that the vegetable oils, hydrogenated vegetable oils, have compromised the immune system. And then roll that forward into their first 3, 6, 12 months of their life. Baby gets, a cold or a, health issue, and immediately dosed up with antibiotics, which compromises the gut, and that health starts with the gut. A healthy gut, healthy life. And so overuse of antibiotics, overconsumption of vegetable oils, and processed foods, and everything that boils into that pot as well is pretty much word on the street in terms of allergies and things like that. I mean, it all boils down to gut health, which no doubt we'll talk a little bit later in more depth. But that, out of all the conversations that I've had over the last 5 years of podcasting, there are a few things that I stand by in terms of I just will not consume, and the number one thing is vegetable oil. I will go out of my way to avoid vegetable oil.
Same.
And that every expert that I have said has been so adamant that this is such a problem for us that I can't ignore it. And so, again, through trial and error, I've eliminated the vegetable oils, started to include more healthy oils with the avocados and olive oil and coconuts and MCT oils, things like that are more stable, that haven't been tampered with, and then you can see if you're into tracking all of these things through things like blood samples. You can see that the inflammatory levels do decline over time when you do that, combined with other practices in health and wellness as well. But it's really, for me, it's just it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, you look at, we profess, nothing beats real food, and the moment that you try and pull back on all of the processed foods, you just feel better, because you're nourishing your body and you're not compromising it.
Absolutely. So many questions, but I can just say myself, based on what you just said at the end with processed foods, is because I had a huge transformation probably about 3-4 years ago, where I was getting major gut issues. I had the binge eating disorder. I think I may have briefly mentioned this on the podcast we did together, where from kind of restrictive eating leading up to competitions and photo shoots and whatnot, I would then go on huge binge eating episodes, and I was consuming processed foods, quite a lot. And the second I cut them out, and I cut out artificial sweeteners as well. So at that point, actually, Stu, I was taking the really poor quality supplements, not really aware enough at the time to know any different, loaded full of artificial sweeteners and coloring dyes and all the other chemicals they mix them with.
Yeah.
And when I cut them out and I started increasing my vegetable intake and eating more whole foods, absolutely transformed my whole life. And I wouldn't be here now talking on this podcast if it wasn't for that transformation. And in a sense, the suffering I went through with the binge eating disorder and the gut issues and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I just wanted to say, in regards to the vegetable oils, it's everywhere, right? So you live in Byron Bay, Stu, right?
Yes.
Oh man, that's what I love about Byron Bay. There's so many great, healthy cafes and stuff to eat from, isn't there?
It is. Yeah, it's a good place. Like, you can generally go out and find good quality food. The hosts typically are happy to announce that it's all locally farmed, nose to tail, farm to table, all that kind of stuff, and whole food based, which is really great to see. Incredible.
But yeah, with the vegetable oils, though, like everywhere you go, pretty much, or most places, even if it poses to be a healthy cafe or restaurant or whatever, generally the norm, 95% of the time, I would say, especially in just the average restaurant, when people, some of the audience listening now on the weekends, they may go out to restaurants like we do and eat.
Yeah.
And we just consume the food, not really assuming that, you know, assuming that they cook them with vegetable oils, right? Because that's kind of the norm. And another thing I struggle with is because it takes a while. This is one of my other questions. I was going to talk to you a bit about intuitive eating and actually eating based on what your body needs, as opposed to the mouth pleasure and the emotions, the emotions, you know, emotional eating, which whether people realize it or not, the majority of people actually, you know, eat based on emotions, you know. They feel anxious, they'll have some food. They're bored, they'll have some food. Watching TV, you know, that's a big one we associate with eating. Just these things that are programmed into our brain. And I find, you know, my brain, like I said, 3-4 years ago, my brain was also hijacked, because that's what I say to people. It's essentially those processed foods that we talked about are kind of manufactured to make you addicted, essentially, right? So where I was going with that is, I was kind of eating when, you know, based on my emotions. I was bored, or the weekend would come around. But to get to the point where you're eating intuitively, it's quite a long road. So like I said, I started eating more vegetables. That was the first big game changer for me. I started connecting to the fact that, wow, I actually feel better when I eat more vegetables. I actually feel more energy. I don't feel like I'm craving those foods much anymore, you know? And those little connections you start making is the first step to I think, eating intuitively. And but when you try and explain to someone about vegetable oils, like, I get laughed at. They're totally fine, because they feel like, you know, they might be relatively healthy individuals, and they don't know what it's like. So when I'm now aware of the fact that sometimes I'll eat out at a restaurant and I feel bloated, I feel inflamed, my gut's not the best the next day. A lot of that most likely is the vegetable oils and whatever else, right? So trying to tell someone that they're not ideal for you, even though we're the sickest we've ever been, and, you know, chronic illness, it's a chronic illness epidemic now, you know, diabetes and heart disease, all these things. So, you know, like you mentioned, the vegetable oils, also refined sugars, those processed foods are obviously contributing to this, right, Stu? So, how would you, because I know you probably... I guess eat intuitively, and I know you eat whole foods, as you just said then, and I love some of the stuff you talk about with the gut and that. But how did you actually get to that point, Stu, where you were eating intuitively? Was it a journey for you?
Yeah, it was a journey, absolutely. And I think the first part of the journey came after we interviewed a lady called Nora Gagaudis. So she's an expert in ancestral health, and very much talks about the paleo-ish diet in terms of whole food and nutrient-dense foods. And she wrote a book called Primal Body, Primal Mind. And that was really the catalyst for us to want to find out so much more, because that was such an interesting read, in as much as it discussed processed carbohydrates, you know, breakfast options, the importance of fat in your diet, the importance of reducing sugar in your diet, and really shed light on what's happening with nutrition in our age. And she went into a lot of detail about wheat and gluten, and said it's really it really compromises the systems from the gut, and it can be very people can become very allergic to it, and they don't even know, in terms of having things like brain fog and asthma and allergies and congestive issues. And I had always had a really stuffy nose for most of my life. I just remember, like, my nose is always blocked up, and so I thought, well, I'm going to experiment. I'm just going to pull gluten out of my diet, and, you know, give it a go for 6 weeks and see what happens. And I used to, you know, eat heaps of bread, and loved bread, coming from England and having the local, you know, bakers on the doorstep and getting a big crusty loaf. I mean, I can still smell it and taste it now. Yeah. It's delicious.
It still smells amazing, doesn't it? And tastes delicious. It still does, even though it does you damage. It still tastes and smells amazing, doesn't it?
Oh,
we grew up on it.
We did. And so I just thought, right, we'll go cold turkey, just pull it out my diet for 6 weeks, see what happens. And it took about 3 days, and my nose was clear immediately.
Wow.
And I just thought, wow, that's insane as to how immediate that could be. And so we started to look more into wheat and gluten and discover, well, what's actually happening in there to cause these reactions, because we've been eating wheat and grains for so long, and then we realised that, well, sure, we may have been eating wheat and grains for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, but it's what we do to the wheat now, and that's the difference. In terms of now, wheat has been changed through a process called hybridization to be able to be resistant to drought and bugs, and can grow underwater now, and it's sprayed with everything under the sun, that it's changed so radically over the last 50 years that it's become alien to our bodies, and our bodies just react and say, I don't know what that is, and all the alarm bells go. So for me, it was really a long process of learning and researching and interviewing experts, and just finding out that the three big ones really are gluten, vegetable oil, and sugar. And if you can tip the scales in favour of reducing all of those things, you're going to be on the path to a healthier you. And that is completely the opposite direction of how most of us eat these days, in terms of we get up and have breakfast cereal, and maybe a juice, or a yogurt or something along those lines, and before you've left the house, you've had your daily intake of sugar right there. And then, of course, you're hungry an hour later, so you have a snack bar or a muffin or something that you crave because you're on this carbohydrate train, straight into lunch, where it might be a roll, of sandwiches, or sushi, or something that's quick and easy and prepared, and then your day just goes pear-shaped from there, and you wonder why you've got brain fog, and perhaps you're carrying a few extra pounds, you don't sleep well, you've got allergies, all of the above. So it's really, for me, it was a transition of just, I've learned this, I want to find out more. And then that moves you into another realm of, wow, if that's happening with wheat, then what's happening with our soil, and what are the chemicals doing that they're spraying on this food? What does that do to us as well? And that just spirals into me wanting to take a more whole food approach. And so if I'm out and about, I can have a look on the menu and think, oh, well, it's easy to get a protein, and it's easy to get vegetables. Most cafes or restaurants will have chicken on the menu, or steak, and I can get veggies or a salad. I just dodge the dressings and the oils and the fried food, things like that, and just in favour of more wholesome food, because essentially I want to just do one thing, which is maximise the nutrition that I can get out of every single meal, because it's an opportunity to feed my body, rather than that being an opportunity to feed my cravings and my appetite. And that's the big thing for me, because I am surrounded by friends and family that are struggling with their health. And for me, we believe that prevention is the cure. So all of this stuff that we're doing now, you might be fine for 10, 15, 20 years, but it'll catch up on you over time. And essentially, if we can get the foundations in place now and teach this stuff to our kids and raise awareness, then the future will be brighter than it is at the moment.
Fascinating, mate. Fascinating, yeah. And like what you said, then it is a project, right? Even like the dreaded C word, cancer, right? They've proven it's for a lot of the time it's lifestyle related, and it's, as you say, it's a 15-20 year project. But how this is another random question I've got for you, but personally, I find it very hard. The hardest people to actually convince and communicate with and get your message to are the people close to you, right? So do you ever have that problem with like family and friends, where you're obviously being who you are and all the great knowledge you've observed from all of these experts you have on your show and with the nutrition company, and obviously practicing what you preach with your health and fitness, how do you still find it quite hard to sometimes get the message across to people? Or
oftentimes people need to have a problem to then want to be able to find a solution. So it's not until you're at that boiling point where you're ready to accept, maybe you should start changing something. And it's like the analogy of, I think, the frog in the boiling water. Have you heard that one?
No, I haven't, no.
So you put it's like putting a frog in a pan and putting the pan on the stove and slowly heating up the water. And the frog doesn't really know what's happening because it's so slow. And ultimately the frog will die in there, will boil, versus boiling up the water first, putting the frog in the water, and the frog just goes, oh my God, and jumps straight out. And so typically it's just like, well, all of this stuff in terms of inflammation, bad food choices, lack of movement, poor sleep, exposure to chemicals, all of that stuff takes a really long time to affect us, and it may end up in real issues in 15, 20 years time, as opposed to having a food that you react to immediately and you think, I can't deal with that. That's more of an immediate reaction. But typically people find it very hard to want to know any more about any given subject until they're in a position where they need to know. So ultimately, I reckon just you lead by example. In terms of, you're looking and you're feeling your best. You're able to exercise effortlessly. You sleep well. You have abundance of energy. You don't get sick. And people say, "Oh, well, how come you're doing this and it doesn't work for me?" And it's then when you say, "Well, I just do these things," and then that's the kind of the instigator for the conversation. But I just think, lead by example. And if you're doing something that people aspire to, then they want to know more and they want to be like you, and figure out what you're doing.
Definitely, yeah. Actions definitely speak louder than words, and that's what. And you must find that as well with your kids as well, right? Because kids, I find, are a lot more intelligent and smart than we actually give them credit for, even from a young age. So I feel like they watch what you do, right? So and they will kind of mimic what you do and follow suit, I guess, a lot of the time, right? So I think that's a good example, right, Stu? So are your kids eating obviously I guess they are, but I guess they enjoy eating vegetables, do they, most of them, or is that still a battle?
Do they? Yeah. It's one of those things. Totally. And it's one of those things because, they're also wildly different. So we've got two that just tuck into the veg left, right, and center, and one that's super fussy. So, so we're very aware, and they're very aware that, well, if they're eating, it's not going to cut it if they're making themselves a plate of pasta or something like that. And it's like, whoa, that's your meal. Well, what's missing here? Like, where's your protein? Where's your fat? Where's your vegetables? Like all of these things. And so, we're definitely a very whole food approach. Their lunch boxes look very different to their friends' lunch boxes. And they are aware that there are consequences to eating the way that we're taught to eat, and the way that their friends eat, and the way that they would be deemed to be eating from television commercials and all the stuff we see online in terms of burgers and sodas and all of the crazy options there that are pushed in front of their face. So they realise that a lot of these things are not the right way to do it, and typically they make the right choices. But for me, it's really hard because you don't want to push it on them, otherwise they'll
of course
they'll dig their heels in and they'll do the complete opposite. That's it. But you just say, well, look, I would recommend that you do this. And this is, we eat together, so we'll all eat the same stuff. And, of course, there's a few whinges when there's veg on there that they're not completely happy with. But ultimately, it's like, just, eat up and, enjoy it and just be well.
Yeah, great. And you, like you said, you can't really stop them from doing stuff. And obviously, they're going to be having some cake at parties and stuff like that. But I guess the good thing is, when they're more connected to, again, even kids, right? They have like a piece of cake, and if they're not having that food very often, they're probably going to have this burst of energy, and then they're going to probably not feel the best, or not feel too great afterwards. Or they might feel fine, but if they, for example, got greedy and had 2 pieces of cake, then they start thinking, oh, okay, I didn't feel too good after that, and they can start connecting the dots from a young age then, right? So,
well, that's right. And I do have a little bit of a strategy for parties as well.
Yeah?
Because,
I thought you might have.
I do.
I love it.
So, because I know, in a party, absolutely, they can go out and they can do what they want, but they know that, just to avoid the fizzy drinks, as best you can. But typically what will happen if they go out to a party, I will make them a lunch before they go, and it will always be the fattiest omelette that I can possibly muster. There'll be eggs and coconut oil in there, and just so much fat. So it's so satisfying and filling that they're just not hungry when they go to these parties, and they're full of the good stuff before we even go, and then they can do what they want.
That's amazing. Do you add cheese to the omelette? Because I personally, when I have an omelette, I've got to have cheese.
Yeah, they do. So 2 of them are into cheese, 1 of them isn't, and there'll be cheese on top too.
You can't go wrong with that then. That's job done, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's wicked, man. That's where I love that. But that takes us on to the gut then. Let's just talk a little bit about the gut. I know you've had some great experts on there in relation to the gut. And did you have Dr. Rusco on there? Did you have what's his name? Dr. Rusco? Did you have him on there?
Ruscio.
Ruscio, that's how you pronounce it. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, an absolute specialist. And
now,
Dr. David Perlmutter as well, who wrote Grain Brain, and is a real expert on gut, and so many different specialists from functional medicine perspective who ultimately are all saying the same thing. Because a decade ago, like you mentioned the word leaky gut to your doctor, and your doctor just like, what? And the term was just ignored as another kind of wacky new age phrase that people are starting to think is an issue, when in actual fact it's something that is super important, so important for long-term health. And typically we're finding that through use of antibiotics and things like artificial sweeteners and sodas and poor food choices, lack of vegetables in favor of more starchy carbohydrates, then you can tip that balance from good bacteria to bad bacteria out of your favor, and then things start to go wrong. You realize, well, I'm putting on weight, I can't lose weight, I can't sleep properly, my brain is foggy, like all of the above. And it's really important just to be mindful of that when you're making decisions each and every day. So I've recently had a microbiome test as well from a company in the States called Viome, and really, really interesting test in as much as you provide a stool sample, you send it off to the States, it gets analysed, and then it comes back and pushes the data of your microbiome, like at this stage, into an iPhone app, and tells you, this is what's happening. Like, these are all of the species of bacteria that you've got, but this is what it means from a food and supplement perspective. So here are the foods that you should avoid for your microbiome that will negatively affect your microbiome. Here are the superfoods that you should try and include every day that will really nourish your microbiome. And from a supplement perspective, these are the things that we recommend you take, because they'll be super beneficial for you, as opposed to just guessing, like, oh, well, maybe I should eat more green vegetables. Right? Well, sure, absolutely, we should definitely eat more green vegetables, but what if there was a certain type of green veg that elicited an inflammatory response in your body? Things like that, we just don't know. And that could be the low-grade inflammation stuff that we talked about earlier, that just kind of grinds away on your body over the course of 20 years, that does turn into something much bigger and much more worrisome down the track. So really, really important to try and get as much of a personalized snapshot on where you are, I think, at any given time. And that's what I'm really interested in at the moment, in terms of getting DNA tested and microbiome tested, tracking things like sleep and recovery, to take the guesswork out of all of this. Because it's so easy now to wander into a supermarket, go into the vitamin and supplement aisle, and you've got 1,000 brands all claiming to do the most wonderful things. Like, where do you start? Do you take your multivitamin, or your stress vitamin, or your sleep, or your herbs, or more protein, more omega-3s? Like, nobody knows. Like, we don't know. We're just told, take a multivitamin, try and reduce your junk food, and do more exercise. Well, I think it needs to be more personalised than that. And some of the stuff that I found out has been fascinating as well, and really shifted the way that I eat and I move as well.
Yeah, that's with the gut. Because obviously, you know, the gut is so fascinating, all the studies and stuff that are coming through now. Because obviously, it takes them a long time to get these studies together, right? 20 years or so sometimes. So now it's all coming to light. I think it's amazing. And, with the gut, the 80% roughly of the immune system, right, is located in the guts. We have let's just say roughly 100 trillion cells in there. So we're actually more bacteria cells even. So we're more bacteria than we are human on a cellular level, right? Yeah. And, the gut, if you took the gut out, it would weigh, if you took your microbiome out and, out of your body, it would weigh like 2 to 3 kilos. So, just with those kind of simple facts alone, it goes to show, and obviously with the gut producing, at least 20 different hormones as well, including serotonin, right? Which is the responsible for mood, appetite, sex drive,
That's right. All of the above. And all of that stuff starts or has been shown to start in the gut, and it's so important. And we realize that when we don't move and we consume the wrong things, we drink the wrong things, we don't nurture, or we're just not aware of our gut, it's very, very easy to tip the scales in the wrong direction and experience ill health in any way, whether it's your mood, your sleep, your energy, your weight, all of the above. Yeah, very, very important, and well worth just doing a little bit of investigation, read a few books, listen to some podcasts, go to the experts online, find out a little bit more and see how that might be able to, you might be able to dive into some of the practices and tools and tips and strategies, techniques that you could apply to yourself, and see what happens, because your doctor doesn't have enough time. You might go in there and you'll have 10 minutes, essentially, oftentimes it's problem disease management, never looking at the root cause. I have a problem, well, here's a pill, instead of, well, what problem do you have? Why do you have that problem? Tell me about how you sleep. Tell me about how you eat. What kind of movement do you do? What environment are you living in at the moment? Are you stressed? All of the above. Doctors just don't have enough time for that. I mean, they do a great job, but they just don't have enough time. So nobody will be more vested in our own health than ourselves. And we're in an age where we have access to the most amazing amount of information. And granted, you could go on a tangent and get caught up in Dr. Google, which is wrong, of course. But at the other end of the scale, you can tap into conversations with cutting edge and pioneering health professionals, and you can read the latest studies that have been pushed out, clinical studies from X, Y, and Z. So it's really, really interesting to be able to do that, and then just slowly apply these things to yourself and see how you feel. Because I know for me, over the last 12 months even, I found some radical things out about my body and made some changes that have made profound effects.
Amazing. But yeah, no, I was just going to say about, on that note then, you mentioned multivitamins and all these kind of things. And I feel like one of the main issues is, as we mentioned, about the amount of information there is available to us now. There's some fantastic information out there. Your podcast, this podcast, we're getting good stuff out there, but it's hard to siphon out all that bullshit, so to speak, for most people. So, I always say to my audience to, focus on the big rocks. Like you mentioned sleep and recovery then, exercise. I always talk about, Rob Wolf, you know Rob Wolf, obviously.
Yes.
His 4 pillars of health, very simple, sleep, exercise, nutrition, relationships. If you're really focusing and putting your energy into those big rocks, and not focusing and not really wasting too much time thinking about what multivitamin you need to take and what not. And I just remembered, I can't think of her name now, but that woman you had on your show talking about the multivitamins, that was that blew my mind, that episode.
Yes, Sonia Pemberton. So she directed the movie called Vitamania, which essentially just looked at the age-old question of, should we really take a multivitamin? Is it doing us any good at all? Or perhaps on the other end of the scale, is it doing us harm? And so, really, really interesting. But yeah, totally, you're completely right. Those 4 pillars are so critical. the most important pillar out of all of them is sleep. And
I agree.
It's the rest and the repair and the reset processes, and it's where our body regenerates. And it's so easy to get wrong, and so many people have issues with sleep, and me included. And I am so laser focused on ensuring that I get the best night's sleep each and every night, for longevity, essentially. And so I do a whole heap of different things to ensure that I do. But yeah, if any of your listeners are struggling with sleep, then I would essentially make that a priority and start to do a little bit of investigative work and see how you can change things to be able to tip the scales in your favor.
Definitely. And like I think I watched something recently that the three main things with sleep is the memory consolidation as well. So you consolidate short and long-term memories within your sleep, and then neurogenesis, right? So the brain literally regenerates. And you mentioned growth hormone earlier as well.
Yeah.
And obviously we secrete the highest amount of growth hormone when we're in a good deep sleep.
Yes.
But, yeah, so important. And I know you had James Swanwick on your show, and I was lucky enough to have him on mine as well.
Great.
And I now work with him. I'm an affiliate he's an affiliate now, and I'm his affiliate. I promote his blue light blockers, because remember I told you about the kind of like the builder style.
The builders. Yeah, the Swannies work really well.
Do you use the Swannies?
I do. Yeah,
they're great, aren't they?
They're the best that I have found.
Awesome.
There's huge amounts of science to back up the importance to minimize blue light in terms of melatonin production and essentially giving yourself jet lag and screwing up your circadian clock. So absolutely, yeah, I'll put those on from kind of 6 p.m. onwards, and super important. And you can find that any of these little things just can impact your sleep cycles in terms of the importance of getting enough REM sleep and deep sleep. And many of us will be getting far less of those two important blocks of sleep that cycle through the night than we would ever know. So yeah, really, really important just to focus on getting good sleep, waking up, feeling refreshed. If you haven't got the time, energy, or don't want to go to the effort of tracking your sleep through wearables, then oftentimes it's just how you feel when you wake up. Like, do you feel refreshed? Do you feel ready for the day? Like, how do you feel throughout the day? If you're feeling like crap in the morning, then typically perhaps your sleep wasn't the best. And if you're sleepy throughout the day, then again, perhaps sleep wasn't the best. And if you're finding that you're forgetting things on a more frequent basis, then your REM sleep's probably compromised as well, because that's where a lot of the memory consolidation happens. So there are all these little pointers that you can dial into, but generally, without all the techie stuff, like, how do you feel? Like, are you getting enough? What time are you going to bed? Like, we all need to be in bed for 8 hours, and typically getting 6 to 8 hours of quality sleep.
Yeah, there we go. That covers that with that big rock. And I just wanted to say then as well talk about memory. I wanted to talk about social media and the iPhone addiction, right? Because this is a big issue. Huge. And as much as I like to talk about the blue light blockers, and they will help a lot, most people listening to this, just quite simply to block that artificial blue light that you get from your iPhone screen and TVs and the artificial lighting. But at the same time, if you're still on your phone and social media, you're scrolling through certain things, or wherever you're doing, checking emails, you're still you have too much stress in your body. If you're on there, even if you have got blue light blockers on or whatever, what I explained to the people, my listeners last time is, sleep is a practice, right? We think as humans, that sleep is just one of those things that happens. We're living in an age now where we're at a higher stress state than ever, I would say, because we've got all these stresses coming from all different angles. It's not all bad, but with the iPhone thing I was talking about, if you don't monitor that, it can become a bit of an issue. And preparing yourself for a good sleep by turning the lights down, I would say, maybe like as James Swanwick says, put the candles on an hour or so before bed, and trying to come away from electronics. So, maybe reading a book. But yeah, so I kind of got two questions. But the first one I wanted to ask you, mate, real quick, was about social media.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask about yourself and your kids, and not just social media. I mean, technology in general, whether that's tablets, gaming. How do you manage to structure it and not get carried away and abuse those things too, especially with your, where you're at with your business and stuff?
Yeah, it's a constant challenge, because being in a business that utilizes social media so much, you need to be on top of it at the same time. But mindful of the importance of shutting down. Like having, I was listening to a podcast this morning with a sleep expert who spoke about having almost like an alarm clock to prepare yourself for sleep, in terms of the alarm clock goes off at 7 p.m. You got to prepare yourself for sleep, which could mean just shut off social media, because it's the chemicals that are released when we're in this spiral, which is social media, in terms of things like, you get onto Facebook. Facebook has a never-ending feed. Like, that's how it's been engineered. The feed never ends. You'll get into the posts and you'll flick and you'll roll through the post. It never ends. And every now and again you'll get that thing that just makes you feel great. It's like, oh wow, look at that. That's so awesome. Dopamine. And then you'll scroll and scroll. Yeah, dopamine hit, bang. Yeah. And so you want another dopamine hit. So you'll scroll and you'll scroll and you'll scroll, and you'll wait for the next one. You blink your eyes and you've lost an hour to social media. Literally, yeah. And then that might spiral into, we're into Instagram, and we're, again, never-ending feed. There's so much stuff going on there, and we're really so active. It keeps our minds so active, when typically we do want to just be switching off to all of that stuff, reading a book, or even watching just a dumb movie. Like I use Netflix as a strategy to wind down. Like, I've got my blue light blockers on, and I'll just watch something that requires no thought, and that just pulls me out of my day. And social media for me is switched off at 7 o'clock. Like, it just has to be. Great. And for kids as well, nothing in the evening. Like, it can't happen. So they'll have some computer time to do things like homework. They're into YouTube now as well, which is quite painful, but we can run that through the TV, so they can have an hour of that, just watching whatever they need to on YouTube. But from a perspective of smartphones, mobile phones, social media, all of that stuff, like we come at a time when that stuff just wasn't around when we were kids, and it was like, they were good times, because definitely we weren't continually interrupted with whatever notification we're getting on a mobile phone that takes us out of the moment and keeps us almost enslaved to these devices. So we monitor it a lot, because I'm mindful that it's so wildly addictive. All of the social media platforms have been designed to be as addictive as they can. And we interviewed a lady called Catherine Price, who is a science journalist, who wrote a book called How to Break Up with Your Mobile Phone, because she was very, very aware of the addictive practices that can occur when social media just is so tantalizing for us, and so captivating that it just sucks us in. And before we know it, we're jittery messes unless we're looking at our phones. And you'll often see that when you're out and about. If you're eating a meal out there's so many people that are just engaged in their phones over a dinner in a restaurant, which is insane. So for me, if I'm out at the weekend, the phone doesn't come with me. Like, if I go out to a meal, the phone stays at home. The phone gets switched off at 7 p.m. at night. The phone never comes in my bedroom with me. And the kids are the same. And then I use shielding devices and blocking devices. Like, I have the night shift on the iPhone, and I put the screen brightness down so I can barely see the thing. So yeah, little practices like that, but really important to be mindful of the fact that if you think you're just going to have a quick sneaky look at Facebook at 10 o'clock at night, you're going to inhibit your sleep, because you'll stimulate yourself, possibly with blue light as well. And then you're in this spiral where you're thinking about whatever it is you've seen on social media, and you've got these addictive patterns in there as well that can be programmed by all of the notifications and the settings that are switched on by default. So it's really, really hard. Trying to be mindful just to put that thing down is a really, really good strategy in the early evening, so you can actually start the process to wind down for a good night's sleep.
Fantastic advice there, Stu. Fantastic, because it's still work in progress for me. I think the awareness is the first step, right? But I wasn't consistent. I was doing what you were doing, and I was cutting it off at 7, and then I went to 7:30. Then it was like 8 p.m., and then I was kind of went back into my old habits.
Yeah.
And so I never go on my phone in the room. The second I go. Yeah. But yeah, I do get sucked in myself. Like, let's say about half of the week I'm pretty good, like yourself. I come away from it maybe about 8 p.m.
Yeah.
But yes, I always read a book before bed as well. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, it's like just the second you start treating it as a drug, because that's what it is. It's completely altering your state of mind. These little spikes of dopamine throughout the day, it's no different to someone who's, I know it sounds quite drastic, and some people, this might trigger some people, but there's no different to a drug addict in a sense, right? Because
hugely addictive.
100%, yeah. Like the dopamine hit you again. And also, I heard something, and I really like this. It's like social media is the processed food of this generation, right? Because if you look at processed foods, Stu, a few years back, let's just go back like 30 years, all these processed foods, refined sugars you find in cereals, and all these, different kinds of engineered, highly palatable processed foods. People are eating them fine, fine, no problem. Later on the line, now we're in an epidemic of obesity and chronic illness, and now we realize, oh shit, those processed foods were actually terrible for our health, and they put us in this state now. And the way you look at social media hasn't been around for that long, as you alluded to then. Even when I was in, like 10 years ago, even 10 years ago for me, I think Facebook, I started using Facebook in 2017 when I was like maybe 19, 20. Yeah. But, some of the kids nowadays, obviously there's a huge correlation between depression and anxiety in teenagers. I think it's from 2011 till about 2015. I believe depression and anxiety rates in teenagers increased by something like 66%. Yeah. So there's a direct link, although they haven't got the studies yet, but they will be coming through, between depression in teenagers, and that's another thing that wasn't about when we were younger, right? This has exploded, and they're spending, some of them are spending most of their day on their phone, and it's like it's pretty obvious, right, Stu?
Well, totally, because you're pulling yourself away from the community that we used to have, which were friends and family, where you used to interact and engage. And now you're in a virtual world where you think everyone's your friend. We're told and shown that everyone's having the best time of their lives through all these wonderful Instagram selfies and phrases and quotes to back that up. Hey, this is just the most amazing time, when nothing could be further from the truth. Depression is spiraling out of control. We're anxious and jittery because we're waiting for the next notification. When it doesn't come, we feel bad. All your friends look to be having the best time of their life. You think, well, why am I not having the best time? And we're not talking anymore. We've never been at a time where we've had so much. Or we could have so much connection with all of the devices, where we can talk to people on the other side of the world and speak to family and friends in different countries through the use of Skype and things like that. But the reality is we're using it in a very different way, and we're feeling lonely and vulnerable.
Great. Yeah, I like the way you put that at the end. And we are literally, as a human race, probably more disconnected than we've ever been, right? Yes. And we're literally experiencing... What we're experiencing now is the most deconditioned humans ever, really, because we've never been in this state where people, like we said, about chronic illness and diabetes, and people are just not moving as much. And then we have, just to top it off, we have not just social media, but when it comes to the availability of food as well, Stu, right? Yeah. So already the processed food done the damage, and now we have these apps like Uber Eats where people can order a McDonald's from their couch.
It's just, I I don't know where that's going. Maybe the next step is somebody actually comes in, they feed it to you, so you don't even have to move your hands.
That will be coming. That's actually a good idea.
Yeah.
That won't be far behind. That's true, though. I mean,
Yeah.
oh God,
it's just insane. So yeah, it's so easy to do any of that stuff, but I just think shift your mindset, get in there, get into the kitchen, start making yourself food, because it's so empowering to know. It's one of the things that you can control. Like you can control what you eat. We can't control the way that we're advertised to when we're out on the streets in terms of all of the billboards and the advertising that we got. We can't control the quality of the air in the city that we live in to a degree, but we can control what we put in our mouths, and that can be the most empowering, because that in and of itself could help us to feel better, to have more energy, to sleep better, to think brighter thoughts. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. Uber Eats. Get rid of the app off your phone.
100%. And just to top it off now, I think Amazon have brought, because Amazon are crushing right now, as you know, you probably know with your supplements and stuff. I guess you use Amazon.
We're about to.
Yeah. Well, they're dominating now, and they're coming out with this new version of Uber Eats. So it's probably going to go even worse now. But I'm aware of your time, Stu, right? So I wanted to ask you one or two more things real quickly.
Sure.
I wanted to delve a bit deeper into business questions, but it's okay. I've got one which I think will cut it.
Okay.
What are the main challenges you faced, you as a CEO of this big company? With, as we mentioned, the online supplement industry being so competitive and kind of cutthroat in a sense. Yeah. What are the main challenges you faced, you?
So I often find that the higher you are up in a company, the more crap you have to put up with, and essentially you're just putting out fires. So for me, it's about having the time to be able to do everything that you need to do, and I get around that with prioritization. So at the end of each day, I'll just sit down and deconstruct the day that's just been and think, right, what sucked my time? What do I need to work on more? What are the priorities for tomorrow? And then I'll write a task list for tomorrow. And I literally have a book here, and I just go through all of my tasks and every single day, and it's just like, and then I with those priorities, how can I prioritize those? And I'll rank them in order of the most important, and then just tick those off when I'm done. So at least I know that if my day blows out with, a phone call that I shouldn't have taken that ends up sucking an hour of your day, or anything that happens in the business that we didn't factor in as part of my day that again sucks up hours, then at least I know these are my priorities. I can get through as many of them as I can, and then from a I guess a systems perspective, always trying to align myself with the best people, because it's very hard to grow anything on your own. So you need the support and skill set of others. And so essentially I'm trying to build relationships with the best people that I can in any given area, whether it be social media management or new product development, all of the above, to be able to then confidently know that they're doing the best job they can for me, and then I can work on the other stuff in terms of actually building the business and the vision of the business as well.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. I learned a bit from that, mate. I like the way you actually write it down as well, right? So old school, like you're not messing around, like, because it's another distraction, right? Because I do it on my phone. I should just start writing it down because I get distracted. Yeah, and you literally black and white there with your pen and paper, no messing.
It's great, and I've got a big book, and I'll go through and I can have a look. Oh, right. So, and oftentimes at the end of a month, I'll go through and I'll just check and see, well, is there anything that what are my notes and thoughts? Is there anything that I need to pull forward again or revisit? But I like to get away from all the digital notifications and just literally script this stuff down. And then that kind of helps with your sleep as well, because you're thinking, well, I already know what I'm doing tomorrow, so I don't need to ruminate on anything that perhaps might worry or keep me awake, because I know what I'm doing. I've got my task list, and it's in black and white. And if I could just sit down and watch a Netflix movie now and enjoy it.
Done. No problem. And you do that the night before? Just you write that down the night before the tasks, obviously, yeah? And then boom.
Oh, yeah.
You get
Generally, at the end of my working day, so, 6 p.m., whatever that might be, I'll just sit down and go, right, what are the most crucial things for the next day? What are going to be the game changers? What are the big wins? And then I'll just slot the smaller things in with that. But as long as I know that I'm ticking off the right things, then I'm tracking in the right direction.
Great. And just to jump the gun now, last question, mate, real quick. What is your number one tip or any tips really for people to lose body fat? Because people their ears always pop up when it comes to losing body fat. My audience always wants to learn more about that, although I keep telling them. Yeah, if you could just give us your top tip or two for fat loss.
Sure.
And for keeping it off, Stu, because that's the key thing, isn't it? It's one thing losing fat, and I think 95% of people can't keep it off. So,
no, that's right. So typically, and there are no surprises here. Just reduce the amount of sugar that you eat, and don't think that sugar is sugar as in the white stuff. So sugar could be in processed carbohydrates like your breads and your pastas and your white rice. Anything that typically converts very quickly to sugar in your body. And what that will do, that will impact your gut health as well. And if your gut health is out of balance, good bacteria versus bad bacteria, it can be almost impossible to lose weight, irrespective of whether you eat enough sugar or not. Like you could eat the cleanest diet possible, and you'd still struggle to lose weight if your bacteria isn't in sync or in harmony. But typically, I look at food as fuel, and providing the raw materials for the day. And I want to start the day that way. I don't want to get up from a good sleep and just jump into a sugary meal, because that will set me up for failure for the day. So it's always about fueling myself, and being very mindful of sugar. Even if it's a sandwich, well, there's not a lot of nutrition there. I'm typically looking for a good balance of protein, fat, and fiber, and to keep me nice and full, power me through the day.
Perfect. Yeah, I like that, because you just reinforced all the stuff I say. So hopefully they'll listen to you.
Yeah, you never know.
Thanks a lot, Stu. I really appreciate your time, mate. There was loads of knowledge bombs within that episode. That was excellent. Thank you for your time, mate.
No problems. And I look forward to catching up with you at some stage soon, because you've got huge amounts to share as well. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks a lot, Stu. I'll catch you soon, mate.
Fantastic. Thank you, mate.
Cheers, buddy.